We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know we will get there. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know we will get there. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know we will get there. Boom, boom, ti-boom, ti-boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, ti-boom, ti-boom, boom, boom. We will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will get there. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know we will get there. Boom, boom, ti-boom, ti-boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, ti-boom, ti-boom, boom, boom. It will be hard, we know, that the road will be muddy and rough, but we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will get there. Boom, boom, ti-boom, ti-boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, ti-boom, ti-boom, boom, boom. It will be hard, we know, that the road will be muddy and rough, but we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know, we know, we will. We will get there. Heaven knows how we will get, but we know we will.
On this dark and stormy morning, I say good morning. Thank you. Any morning we are together, rain or shine, is always a good morning. Welcome to the live in-person and live Zoom worship service of the Universalist Unitarian Church of Riverside. Our opening hymn this morning is number 300, With Heart and Mind, from the Gray Hymnal. Feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you. Please stand in body or spirit and join us in singing hymn number 300, With Heart and Mind. Thank you for joining us here in person, and thank you for joining us remotely by Zoom, where we will continue live streaming and posting these services on our YouTube channel for our virtual attendees. I am Nick Williams, a member of the worship service, and I will be your worship associate today. Other members of the worship committee who make this service possible include Alec, Peck, our music coordinator, who will also speak today, and Adam Wedeking, who monitors our visual and online connections, and Kate Lewicki in the far back, who is in charge of our sound system. We welcome you to join us this morning with an open mind and an open heart, and with muted electronic devices. We invite you to leave your worries and defenses at the door and trust that what happens in worship is inspiring and powerful. Together, we affirm that this day and our being together can make each of us braver, more compassionate, and wiser as we begin a new day and a new week. Before we move into the service, there are a few announcements we would like to share. We will mention several websites, email addresses, and phone numbers. At the end of the service, we will leave up a slide with all this information, and it is available on our website. Join us next week after the service for the first Sunday luncheon. Next week, the theme will be baked potato bar. Feel free to bring your favorite toppings. Our lunch series continues on February 15th at 1:30 p.m. with a pasta luncheon. Tickets are advance sale only. See Robert to purchase tickets. The suggested donation is $25 for adults. This concludes today's announcements. Welcome to all our visitors today, and welcome back, old friends. We would love to meet you during coffee hour after the service. If you're comfortable doing so, please give us a wave so that we can recognize you later. And those on Zoom, you can make a wave gesture or just wave at your camera. We'd love to chat with you out in the parish hall, where you can also find our visitors book. Please leave your name before you leave so that we know you were here, and leave your contact information so that we can update you on church events through email. There will be a short discussion after the service to share your reflections with us. For those online, the best way to get added to the mailing list is to email the church office at admin@uuchurchofriverside.org. And now I invite you to sit back, take a slow, deep breath as we move into the worship hour. You are welcome to read with me the mission statement of our church. Our mission is to foster a diverse religious community that celebrates life, affirms the individual, encourages spiritual growth and open thought, and works to advance social justice and environmental sustainability. Today's speaker is UUCR member Alec Peck. Alec has been a practicing UU for 25 years and has a deep passion for the intellectual and spiritual challenges which arise from exploring the 6 sources of our living tradition. He was raised in a UU church, chosen by his father, raised Quaker, and mother, raised Jewish, though both humanist in practice. Alec recently spent 2 years studying natural science at Creighton University, a Jesuit institution, and is now completing his PhD at UC Riverside. Last week, we celebrated America's most iconic black leftist, Martin Luther King Jr. Most people now don't think of the Southern Baptist preacher as being particularly liberal, much less a leftist, and don't know about the radical social philosophies that inspire him. After his famous "I Have a Dream" speech, he preached increasingly more often about radical beliefs about the rights of property and ownership. As King's legacy has transformed over the years, his ties to leftist and social figures like Kwame Ture, Philip Randolph, and W.E.B. Du Bois have been whitewashed or forgotten. But King saw these ideals as integral to the dream of a beloved community for all. We have 2 lightings of sacred flames. The first is a remembrance candle for the indigenous peoples who continue to cry out for justice and self-determination. We remember that underneath us is the unceded land of several indigenous peoples, the Kawia, the Lusania, and the Kapania. We light this sacred flame in their remembrance and in recognition of their ongoing struggle for freedom and dignity. Our second sacred flame is our chalice, the symbol of our faith. We are blessed with this space and opportunity to strive to live out our common principles, to bring justice, equity, and compassion into our daily lives, to resist all that threatens the earth and her people, and to be part of a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Let these thoughts carry us forth as we journey and worship together. Today's chalice lighting words are an excerpt from Martin Luther King's sermon, Love Your Enemy. Returning hate for hate multiplies hate, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. The chain reaction of evil, hate begetting hate, wars producing more wars must be broken, or we shall be plunged into a dark abyss of annihilation. Our hymn now is number 121, We'll Build a Land, from the Gray Hymnal. Feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you. Please stand in body or spirit and join us in singing number 121, We'll Build a Land.
We'll build a land where we bind up the broken. We'll build a land where the captives go free, where the oil of gladness dissolves all mourning. Oh, we'll build a promised land that can be. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. We'll build a land where we bring the good tidings to all the afflicted and all those who mourn, and we'll give them garments instead of ashes. Oh, we'll build a land where peace is born. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. We'll build a land building up ancient cities, raising up devastations from old, restoring ruins of generations. Oh, we'll build a land of people so bold. Come, righteousness, scattered people, oh come build the land, my people we seek. Come build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream.
This portion of our service is to support our beloved historical church. This can be accomplished in several ways. In addition to the weekly collection, you may send your checks to the church address, which is shown here. You may contribute by PayPal using the QR code, which is shown here, as well as on the church website and in the newsletter. Stater Brothers Market gives our church a rebate on Stater grocery cards, which we will have in the church each Sunday. You can get the full value, and the church also receives a percentage for free. Please see Dinah Rowe or Robert Braun in the church office if you are interested in purchasing the gift cards. Today is 50-50 Sunday, which is held on the fourth Sunday of the month. If you wish to donate to the 50-50 program, half of each designated donation goes to the featured organization and half to the general fund. This is in addition to your pledge to the church. Please write 50-50 on the memo line of your check or on the envelope you find in the pews. Today, we are donating to our maintenance fund that goes specifically to the physical upkeep and maintenance of our church and the neighboring annex. The church that we are gathered in was built in 1892, which makes it over 130 years old. This means it requires a lot of love and care to continue serving as our spiritual home. Now we will invite our church's caretaker, Avery Burrows, to give us a report on our current repairs. He's not here? All good things come in time. Go ahead. You go.
Good morning. We have a very crucial dilemma with this church. We had to trim trees, and now our budget is way down on maintenance. We have a number of projects to undertake, and I won't go into them all. I did last time. But there's always upkeep to an old building, and we need your help. Thank you.
Thank you, Avery. Please donate as the Spirit moves you by whatever method works best for you. Thank you for your generosity. To those who give of their time and their talent, thank you for your generous care and attention. And to all who have joined us here today, we thank you for the gift of your presence. Will our ushers now please come forward to receive the collection? A tote bag will be passed around to collect food and hygiene items for our local community. As you can see, I have brought something. I put several items in my car and carry them so that each week I remember to bring something in to donate to those who are very needy. Our next hymn is number 1010, We Give Thanks, from the Teal Hymnal. Feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you. Please stand in body or spirit and join us in singing hymn number 1010, We Give Thanks. Our meditation today is a meditation on the power of we by Elandria Williams. No relation. Put your feet down because we're about to do embodiment. Close your eyes. Breathe in, breathe out. When you hear the word liberation, liberation spirit, liberation life, liberation possibilities, what does that conjure in your soul? When you hear, we are the liberating force, spirit, light, and love, what does that conjure in your spirit? When you hear that we have the power to transform the world around us, what does that mean in your bones? When you hear, we are the people that we have been waiting for, we are, how does that feel in your blood? We are the light, we are the wisdom. We are the ancestors. We are those yet to come. How do we fully hold all of that in ourselves? Open your eyes. Look at the people around you. Look at the people around you. And go out and organize. Now let us pause for a moment of silence and reflection. Now I would like to introduce Alec Peck, speaking to us on Martin Luther King Jr.'s radical inspirations. Alec Peck.
Thank you, Nick. In 1968, James Earl Ray was a poor ex-criminal. He was an armed robber, a fraudster, who had flunked out of the military with little left to lose. Despite his financial situation, he was suddenly able to afford plastic surgery, an expensive process in those days, after which he stalked and shot Martin Luther King Jr., killing him with a single bullet, which didn't match the rifle that he had bought the week before, through 2 windows across a street while standing on a bathtub with a yet unknown amount of direct assistance from the United States' FBI. But why did the FBI assassinate King? Why was he selected, partially by that same government 5 years earlier, to help lead the March on Washington? And what caused such a drastic shift in those 5 years? The answer to those, and even those questions, are not usually taught in American schools today. For most people, King's story ends with the March on Washington, skipping then right to the assassination. But in those 5 years, he had sought to achieve his dream that he spoke about at that rally. He recognized the political realities of creating a beloved community where we all go forth hand in hand in kinship. I said in that introduction that Nick read for us that King was the most iconic black leftist. First, I'll mention that I use leftist here to distinguish from liberals, where liberal is a political stance believing that our current economic and representative democratic system can be freed from injustices if we only regulate it correctly, as opposed to leftists who believe that capitalism and our current government cannot be safeguarded from injustices. Though, unlike the right-wing alternatives to governance, these so-called leftists believe that injustice stems from the inherent worth and equality of all peoples, who believe in the freedom of belief and expression, and who recognize the interconnected social fabric which we are all a part, values I think you will recognize. And when I say he's the most iconic black leftist, I don't really mean that he was the most black or the most leftist, but just that he was the most iconic. King, in his letter to Coretta Scott King, his wife, had described himself as being anti-capitalist, closer to communist or socialist, and, as I'll discuss in a moment, had worked openly with black gay men. King was less willing to openly support ideas that were considered socialist at the time, for reasons, again, that we'll get to, but he allied himself with many populist and socialist thinkers and activists. I'd like to start with King's most iconic role, that part that he played in the March on Washington. Yes, perfect. This march was originally organized by A. Philip Randolph with the help of Bayard Rustin, and King was only later brought in to speak at the march. And I've pulled a good amount of biographical information on these people from a few sources, and so I want to mention that I'm heavily stealing directly from the sources that I found online. I couldn't write a better biography, and a lot of this part on Philip Randolph was taken actually from the History Channel's website, and despite their dubious reputation nowadays, I thought this was actually a pretty good, pretty well-written article. Asa Philip Rudolph was born on April 5th of 1889 in Crescent City, Florida, where his father was a preacher in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. He grew up in an intellectual household, and Randolph and his older brother both studied at the Cookman Institute in Jacksonville, a Methodist school founded during the Reconstruction as Florida's first all-black institution of higher education. Inspired by the writings of leading black intellectual W.E.B. Du Bois, Rudolph settled in Harlem, where he found a job working on the switchboard in an apartment building and enrolled in courses at the City College of New York. Randolph's devotion to the socialist cause led to a job working for the Brotherhood of Labor, an employment agency for black workers. In 1914, he then married Lucille Green, a young widow and Howard University graduate who owned a beauty salon in the building where he worked. Randolph and Chandler Owen, a law student and fellow socialist thinker, met the following year in 1915 and became close friends. The two men joined the Socialist Party the following year and soon began publishing the magazine Hotel Messenger, later renamed just The Messenger, to advance their socialist views and rally fellow African Americans to their cause. A few years later, Rudolph and Owens were arrested and jailed briefly for sedition for their public criticism of Woodrow Wilson's presidential administration and its policies during the First World War. The Messenger published poetry by black authors, discussed the racism faced by black troops in Europe, collective rights of the railroad workers, and with hit pieces with titles like Private Property, a Pillar for Racial Prejudice. In the summer of 1925, Randolph received an invitation to speak to a group of porters from the Pullman Palace Car Company, a Chicago-based company that hired mainly African-American men to serve white passengers aboard its luxury railroad sleeping cars. Pullman porters were generally paid fairly lower wages than their white workers and subjected to a punishing work hours and conditions. After this initial meeting, Randolph agreed to help organize the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, or BCSP, the nation's first predominantly black labor union. Under Randolph's leadership, the BSCP became the first black union to be granted a charter by the African Federation of Labor, or the AFL. And by 1934, Congress had amended the earlier Railway Labor Act to specifically cover workers in sleeping cars, making it illegal for Pullman to fire members of the BSCP. The new legislation paved the way for Randolph and the BSCP to win collective bargaining agreements and sign a contract with Pullman that recognized the union, reduced porters' monthly work hours, and raised wages. Meanwhile, in addition to workers' rights, Randolph had gained national prominence as an outspoken advocate for racial equality. In 1941, he announced a large protest march in Washington, D.C., aimed at convincing President Franklin D. Roosevelt to end discrimination in the nation's defense industries. After Roosevelt responded by issuing Executive Order 8801, which opened war industries in World War II to black workers and created the Fair Employment Practices Commission, or FEPC, Randolph canceled the planned march. But in 1948, Randolph's activism similarly helped persuade President Harry Truman to desegregate the U.S. Armed Forces with the passage of the Universal Military Service and Training Act. Speeches prepared for the March on Washington by John Lewis, well known now for his role in Congress, and Philip Randolph were initially criticized because of their communist undertones, with Randolph having such bars as, quote, it falls to the Negro to reassert this proper priority of values because our ancestors were transformed from human personalities into private property. It falls to us to demand new forms of social planning, to create full employment, and to put automation at the service of human needs, not at the service of profits. Randolph organized several other major protest marches in the nation's capital in the late 1950s, including the Pilgrimage of Prayer in 1957, and 2 youth marches protesting the slow pace of school segregation in the South. In 1959, he had helped found the Negro American Labor Council, which aimed to fight racial discrimination within labor unions. And then, finally, in 1963, Randolph worked with fellow activist Bayard Rustin to spearhead the massive March on Washington held on August 28th. At that event, nearly 250,000 people gathered to hear from the civil rights leaders, including Martin Luther King Jr., delivering his famous I Have a Dream speech from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. Randolph, whose beloved wife Lucille died only weeks before the event, told the crowd that they were witnessing the beginning of a new fight, quote, not only for the Negro, but for all Americans who thirst for freedom and a better life. His partner in organizing this march, Bayard Russell, I also have pictured here beside him. Along with the information I got from the History Channel's website, I also found a website called the Platypus Affiliated Society, which is about documenting historical leftist figures, which I've also taken a lot of this from. I just want to be clear that I did not write a lot of these words. While King spoke as the face of the civil rights movement, another man stood behind the scenes as an indispensable force within that movement, and that man was Bayard Rustin, a man whose life was shaped by the very prejudices that the movement fought against, not only because of his race, but also for his sexuality. Rustin would spend his life fighting for the rights of others, even while facing discrimination of his own. To the hundreds of thousands who were bused to Washington for the march, Rustin was synonymous with the movement. After all, he was the march's chief organizer. Rustin had organized this march in an 8-week period, without cell phones, without email, without faxes. And so he and his team were working the phones hard, and they were typing letters constantly, says Michael G. Long, editor of I Must Resist, Bayard Rustin's Life and Letters, and co-author of Bayard Rustin, The Invisible Activist. It's no surprise that Rustin was able to find composure in chaos. Born in 1912 and raised by his grandparents in Westchester, Pennsylvania, Rustin learned Quaker values of nonviolence and peace from an early age. His confidence in those beliefs and in himself were reinforced by his grandmother, Julia Rustin, who affirmed his sexuality, a response that was nearly unheard of at the time. According to Bayard, she wasn't so concerned so much with him about dating men as she was concerned about the men that he chose, Long explains. Rustin was an activist on the front lines of the civil rights movement, a strategist for Martin Luther King Jr., and an essayist on the highest caliber. His politics, however, were a little bit difficult to characterize. On the one hand, he was a member of the Young Communist Leagues in the 1930s and was fond of throwing the word lumpen proletariat into his polls. On the other hand, he quickly left that communist group and never described himself as a Marxist in his essays or letters explicitly, and was opposed to communism throughout the Cold War. Today, we might call Rustin a democratic socialist, but even that isn't quite right. It's not clear that he would have been welcomed by the likes of Alexandria I'm bad at pronouncing her name, Ocasio-Cortez or Bernie Sanders, and this is because he believed fundamentally in the unity of the human family. This may sound like a platitude, but he carried it to its logical conclusion, and it's one of the most profound ideas ever devised at the intersection of ethics and politics, and Rustin did carry it to its logical conclusion. After leaving the Young Communist League, Rustin shifted his attention to socialism, joining the Fellowship for Reconciliation, FOR, in 1941, a few years before the march. A few decades, before the march. The group, led at the time by A.J. Must, advocate for peace, labor rights, and equality for all people, unless those people were gay. It was through his interest in socialism that Rustin met his mentor, A. Philip Randolph. In 1941, Rustin, along with Randolph and Musty, had proposed a march on Washington to combat the discrimination of black workers in the Defense Department. In fact, it was Randolph who persuaded Rustin to meet with Martin Luther King Jr. in Montgomery, Alabama in 1956 to show support for the Montgomery bus boycott. Again, King would then be forever changed with his encounter with Rustin. Dr. King had read Gandhi, but at that point he hadn't accepted pacifism as a way of life. And so when Rustin arrived in Montgomery, Dr. King's home was full of guns, Long explains. It was Bayard Rustin and a few other pacifists who really encouraged Dr. King to accept pacifism as a way of life. In Rustin's view, when blacks could not vote, they had every reason to protest. But the moment they could, the protest ceased to be a wise strategy. After the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the problem shifted from being primarily political in the nature of to the nature of primarily economic in nature. Black people could now get into restaurants and movies and so forth, but what good was it if they had no money? As Rustin saw it, economic solutions required progressive legislation, such as full employment and public housing, and that meant voting in progressive congressmen rather than protesting in the streets. That's the argument from his essay, From Protests to Politics. His views were rooted in something beyond the specifics of his identity and the social groups and labels used to oppress people. He saw that hierarchical power produces systems of injustice, which arises arbitrarily, saying, quote, "My activism did not spring from my being gay, or for that matter, from my being black. Rather, it is rooted fundamentally in my Quaker upbringing and the values that were instilled in me by my grandparents who reared me. Those values are based on the concept of a single human family and the belief that all members of that family are equal. Adhering to those values has meant making a stand against injustice to the best of my ability, whatever and wherever it occurs. In the years following the famous March on Washington, King was becoming increasingly more amenable to pro-Black and pro-socialist sentiments, saying in 1968, quote, "At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. Today, many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the Black man that he ought to lift himself up by his bootstraps. This is what we are faced with, and this is a reality." After the march, he also had said, quote, "Those that make peaceful revolution impossible only make violent revolution inevitable." And just 2 weeks before his assassination, he had this to say about revolution: "It is not enough for me to stand before you tonight and condemn riots. It would be morally irresponsible for me to do that without at the same time condemning the contingent, intolerable conditions that exist in our society. These conditions are the things that cause individuals to feel that they have no alternative other than to engage in violent rebellion to get attention. And I must say tonight that a riot is the language of the unheard. And what is it that Americans have failed to hear? It has failed to hear that the promise of freedom and justice have not been met, and it has failed to hear that a large segment of white society are more concerned about tranquility and the status quo than about justice and humanity." In those years, King was becoming a figurehead for a Black populist movement, a movement that explicitly had the goals of fair labor practices for workers, reparations, and health care access. At one point in Chicago, 25% of the Communist Party's support was from Black voters, a sizable percentage given the demographics of that area. Next slide, please. One of the names that was already mentioned was W.E.B. Du Bois, who was 95 years old at the time of the March on Washington, born in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, on February 23rd of 1868. Du Bois became the first person in his extended family to attend high school and did so at his mother's insistence. In 1883, Du Bois began to write articles for papers like the New York Globe and the Freeman. Du Bois initially attended Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee, a school for Black students, and Du Bois became an editor of the Herald, the student magazine. After graduation, Du Bois attended Harvard University, starting in 1888, and eventually receiving advanced degrees in history. His doctoral thesis, The Suppression of the African Slave Trade to the United States of America, 1638 to 1870, became his first book and a standard in American education covering slavery. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics offered Du Bois a job in 1897, leading to several groundbreaking studies on Black Southern households in Farmville, Virginia, that uncovered how slavery still affected the personal lives of African Americans. Du Bois would do 4 more research studies for the Bureau, 2 in Alabama and 2 in Georgia. These studies were considered radical at the time when sociology existed in a purely theoretical form. Du Bois was pivotal in making investigations and data analysis crucial to sociological study. During the same period, Du Bois wrote The Strivings of the Negro People for the Atlantic Monthly, a groundbreaking essay that explained to white readers how it feels to be a victim of racism. It is considered the general public's introduction to Du Bois. Among the books written in this period was The Souls of Black Folk, a collection of sociological essays examining the Black experience in America. Partially derived from his Atlantic article, it embraced Du Bois's personal history and his arguments. The book has also introduced the idea of double consciousness, in which African Americans are required not only to view themselves, but also the view of that world, particularly whites, had on them during all parts of their life. In 1910, Du Bois accepted the directorship of the recently formed NAACP. He moved to New York City and served as the editor of the organization's monthly magazine, The Crisis. Du Bois also became interested in communism and international issues, becoming an open supporter of progressive and left-wing groups, which created problems with the NAACP leadership, and he left the organization in 1948. Du Bois's radicalism continued in the public sphere, running as the Progressive Party's candidate for Senate in 1950, but losing. But he and other members of the Peace Information Center were charged as agents of a foreign principle inspired by the organization's Soviet leanings, but were acquitted in a trial a couple years later. A decade later, in 1961, Du Bois officially joined the American Communist Party before leaving the country to live in Ghana at the invitation of the president to become a citizen. For Du Bois's 100th birthday, King gave a speech titled Honoring Dr. Du Bois just a month before his assassination. King said of Du Bois, "It would be well to remind white America of its debt to Dr. Du Bois. When they corrupted Negro history, they distorted American history, because Negroes are too big a part of the building of this nation to be written out of it without destroying scientific history. White America, drenched with its lies about Negroes, has lived too long in a fog of ignorance. Dr. Du Bois gave them a gift of truth for which they should be eternally indebted to him. Dr. Du Bois's greatest virtue was his committed empathy with all the oppressed and his divine dissatisfaction with all forms of injustice. Today we are still challenged to be dissatisfied. Let us be dissatisfied until every man can have food and material necessities for his body, culture and education for his mind, freedom, and until ratified, vermin-filled slums will be a thing of a dark past, and every family will have a decent, sanitary home in which to live. Let us be dissatisfied until the empty stomachs of Mississippi are filled and the idle industries of Appalachia are revitalized. Let us be dissatisfied until brotherhood is no longer a meaningless word at the end of a prayer, but the first order of business on every legislative agenda. Let us be dissatisfied until our brothers of the Third World, Asia, Africa, and Latin America, will no longer be the victims of imperialist exploitation, but will be lifted from the long night of poverty, illiteracy, and disease. Let us be dissatisfied until this pending cosmic elegy will be transformed into a creative psalm of peace and justice will roll down like water from a mighty stream. The last person I have pictured here is Kwame Ture, formerly known as Stokely Carmichael, who is a civil rights activist, a writer, and an orator known as a lead figure within the Pan-African and Black nationalist movements. And he coined the now popular slogan, Black Power, in its now political context. Stokely Carmichael was born in the port of Spain, Trinidad, and Tobago, where he grew up, but he grew up in New York City. And he attended Howard University, where he became involved in student protest groups, including the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, and the Congress of Racial Equality, which organized the Freedom Rides in 1961. Carmichael participated in the Freedom Rides in an attempt to integrate a train and cafeteria in Jackson, Mississippi. In 1964, the year after the March on Washington, Carmichael graduated from Howard and, along with other young SNCC activists, became increasingly frustrated with the movement's reliance on white liberals and its advocacy of nonviolent reform, especially in the wake of the Democratic Party's betrayal of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. In May 1965, Carmichael was elected to replace John Lewis as SNCC chairman, formalizing the shift in the SNCC's ideology. During a 1966 march in Mississippi, Carmichael first proclaimed Black Power. The slogan, and Carmichael's subsequent efforts both to define it and put it into practice, turned him into a media celebrity and a lightning rod for white criticism and government repression. Black Power fragmented the liberal civil rights coalition of the early 1950s and 1960s, but inspired subsequent groups such as the Black Panther Party, which, despite ideological disagreements, named Carmichael as its honorary prime minister in 1968. In his book, Strategy for a Black Agenda, Henry Winston accused Kwame Ture, then known as Stokely Carmichael, of being among those who were opposed to Martin Luther King. The relationship between the two men at the time had been framed as oppositional or a contentious friendship. And it's true that the two men had significant ideological differences, which stem mainly from Ture's rejection of King's nonviolent ideology. Martin Luther King Jr. saw the potential of Carmichael's marches and decided to join him. King and his organization, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, joined forces with the SNCC. The goal was to draw attention to the injustices of racism and the inequality throughout the South. The march gained momentum as it went along and eventually drew in thousands of participations across the country. Carmichael spent his last decades of his life abroad, denouncing U.S. racism and imperialism while working to build the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. He changed his name to Kwame Ture in 1968 in honor of his friends and political allies, Pan-African leaders Sekou Ture and Kwame Nkrumah. Pan-Africanism is a movement which celebrates the total liberation and unification of Africa under scientific socialism. This quote from Ture: "The more you love people, the more you work for people. The more you work for people, the more you want to know people. The more you study and know the people, the more you love the people. And the more you love the people, the harder you work for the people." Kwame lived until 1998, I believe, and spoke actively about a variety of political subjects, even in the later years of his life. In fact, I even have a short clip for you that I'd like to share from 1995, which you'll find resonates even with current issues today.
Zionism is a political philosophy which has brought about the state of Israel, the so-called state of Israel. This political philosophy has nothing to do with religion. On the contrary, it seeks to confuse others and let them think that Zionism and Judaism is one and the same. I am a conscious African. I know properly my history. I know that Africa gave Judaism to the world. I know that the first Jews in the world were Africans. Not only do I know this, but I inform everyone who has doubts about it to read a book by Sigmund Freud entitled Moses and Monotheism as a beginning. Consequently, I know that Judaism and Zionism are not the same. Zionism had its first organizational expressions in 1897 in Basel, Switzerland, in Europe. Here was a man by the name of Theodor Herzl, H-E-R-Z-L. He was the founder of Zionism. He said that he was going to find the state that God promised the Jews. Listen to this very carefully. This man, Herzl, was an atheist. He believed that there was no God. He said God did not exist. Now, how is it that a man who believes that God does not exist is going to find a state that God promised to his chosen people? I tell you, this man is Satan in disguise. Zionism is a satanic movement. It is devil. It is imperialism. It is racist. It has gone and taken the lands of the Palestinian people and through terrorism has driven them out. And through terrorism, it maintains its power. And the United States of America, with over 6 million homeless, sends to Israel billions and billions and billions of dollars everywhere to bomb Palestinian people while homeless people are here and unemployed are here. Zionism is going to raise this war and make the people in America become clear to what it is and become anti-Zionist and stop the aid to Israel and use the money to take care of the homeless in this country.
That was 30 years ago. About 20 years after King... you can go to the next slide, please. About 20 years after King's death, the Reagan administration created a sanitized version of Martin Luther King Jr.'s life to be celebrated as a new national holiday. The version of King they made is what most Americans know today. They left out his socialist leanings that he and most of the civil rights legends that we celebrate today were amenable to, because he recognized capitalism as the economic arm of white supremacy, and that black oppression was not going to be solved within that existing system. Recall that the 1950s was directly after the Red Scare, and sensitive to the fact that that tying black civil rights directly to socialism would all but guarantee the failure of the movement, King was much less open about his beliefs. But many of the quotes that I pulled from King came from the last few months of his life, where he began speaking more openly about his influences. And when he was killed, he was seen by the government as a direct enemy of capitalism. And at this point, he was seen as a radical activist and hated by a vast majority of white Americans. But over that time, by the time that Reagan had made a holiday, he had scrubbed away many of the more radical edges of Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy. William Sullivan, who was working for Hoover's FBI, said at the time that King should be targeted as, quote, the most dangerous Negro in terms of bringing the people to communism. The March on Washington was not exactly what it is portrayed as today, where oppressed and oppressors held hands and sang Kumbaya. They were not playing by the rules and working within the system as it was dictated to them, using only state-sanctioned ways of protesting. There are indications that political ideologies in the U.S. now are shifting once again. We're really seeing the effects of late-stage capitalism. Our capitalist democratic republic is now clearly not working for the betterment of all Americans, much less all peoples. While it's amazing how things change, it's also shocking how they stay the same. It's easy to forget that much of this is recent history by looking only at black and white pictures, especially for someone like me, who's young enough not to remember it. But King's vision is just as important today as it was back then. I had a fascinating journey researching these figures and learning some of the history that I wasn't taught. And so as I leave you with this, I want to encourage you to investigate into some of this history which has been intentionally left out of the textbooks. Thank you for giving me your time today.
Thank you, Alec, for an extraordinarily informative speech. Our closing hymn is number 149, Lift Every Voice and Sing, from the Gray Hymnal. Feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you. Please stand in body or spirit and join us in singing hymn number 149, Lift Every Voice and Sing.
place for which our parents sighed. stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is fast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast known us the star on the day, thou who hast by thy mind led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places of God where we met thee, lest our hearts drunk with the wine of the world we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land.
Thank you, Tinka, for your song signing. Today's benediction is a quote from A. Philip Randolph. Salvation for a race, nation, or class must come from within. Freedom is never granted, it is won. Justice is never given, it is exacted, and the struggle must be continuous, for freedom is never a final fact, but a continuing, evolving process to higher and higher levels of human, social, economic, political, and religious relationship. Look for the enemies of Medicare or higher minimum wages, of Social Security, of federal aid to education, and there you will find the enemy of the oppressed, the coalition of Dixiecrats and reactionary Republicans that seek to dominate the Congress. Namaste, amen, and blessed be. Thank you, Alec, for sharing your valuable time and insights with us this morning. It is sincerely appreciated, and we look forward to seeing you again. We will have a 10 to 15 minute discussion following the service, and for those who wish to share their thoughts and observations on today's topics. Please be aware this will be included on the video that is posted. For the rest of you, you're now welcome to adjourn into the parish hall. Would anyone like to come up and share their thoughts?
There's a banner that used to be up. I don't know if it still is. We could probably find it. Is this on? Okay, thank you. A banner, I think those who do something to curb whatever shall make revolutionary, will make war inevitable or something. That was, I believe, from Eldridge Cleaver. Maybe that was a quote from Eldridge, but I swear I heard that it came from Martin Luther King a few days before his march or something like that, which I had to check to see if my ears are still working. I don't think, I'd stay away from Platypus and the History Channel and try to find books that are more, back in the era before all of these various social media and various venues have come out to. I tell you, if if J. Edgar Hoover had heard something like this, he would have had all sorts of things to throw at King. The best he could do was to say that King was constantly banging women. And King responded by saying, if I were doing half what is being said of me, I'd be a mighty man indeed. You may want to look that up. As far as why King was killed, he was killed on the first anniversary to the day of when he gave that speech in Riverside Church, I think in New York, could be wrong, but not here, where he tied, he was going to tie all poor people of all races together in the March on D.C. to demand that Johnson shut down the Vietnam War. When Johnson heard that speech, unfortunately there's no video, only audio of that speech at the Riverside Church, but it was reported that Johnson was extremely mad and felt betrayed by King because he wanted King to stay in his lane and to reach over into the Vietnam War. Johnson had no way of knowing how to shut down that war without the Democrats losing power. So he was choosing to keep the war going rather than to shut it down and perhaps his party to lose its position in Congress. Those of us who lived through that time do have some memory. Thank you.
Any other comments? Hi, Margaret.
Hi, Nick. I always have a twin feeling of disappointment and sort of vindication when I hear about how long-standing certain issues are. But I am always comforted by Senator Lewis's quote that don't lose hope. This is not the fight of a day or a month. This is the fight of a lifetime. And we have to not forget that it's been going on for many lifetimes, and we still have work to do.
Thank you.
My name's Tim, and it seems like this philosophy of this church is kind of like existential, or utilitarianism, the most good for the most people. I learned that in philosophy. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Alec, what ran through my mind when you were describing, I think it was A. Philip Randolph. Anyway, you were describing, and to me, he sounded like a universalist. That there was a quote that you gave that just fit so perfectly with. Was he the one about the family, creating the family? Oh no, was that him or was that Ruskin?
I'll check that for you.
Anyway, whoever it was, it talked about creating the family, and everyone is, the same and equal, and I just felt like that's, you're delivering it in a universalist church, and I just felt that I could see him qualifying as a universalist.
Anyone else?
I just wanted to ask Alec if he has any more detailed information on justifying the certainty with which he said the FBI killed King?
I don't. So as you know, the official story is that, given by the FBI, is that they found a plan written out by the fellow whose name is not worth remembering, and that he had purchased a rifle which, according to their own evidence, does not match the bullet that Martin Luther King Jr. was shot with. I don't have a whole lot of exact details for you, but I do know that there's a long history of sketchy information coming from the FBI about exactly what happened that day, and it certainly seems unusual to me that someone so down on their luck would suddenly get the funds and desire to go and kill Martin Luther King Jr. And also, as mentioned, there are several sources within the FBI specifically claiming that Martin Luther King Jr. is an enemy of the American people. And by that, they mean an enemy to capitalism and the status quo from within Hoover's FBI. And what was, this was before the counterintelligence agency, whatever it was called there, anti-American, yeah, maybe that one. But he was certainly targeted, even if not literally, he was targeted as a threat to the FBI.
Thank you both.
I just want to let people, if you get a chance to, if you're ever in Memphis, the Lorraine Hotel, which of course is where King was assassinated, and he was there to help the march of the sanitation workers there in Memphis. And they had, well, anyway, it's a whole separate thing. And I just want to let you know that the hotel, the Lorraine Hotel, is turned into a civil rights museum. And when you, like you're facing this way and here's the hotel, you're in the parking lot. If you turn around this way and face, there's kind of the land kind of goes uphill, and so a small little incline, and on the top of that is the hotel where the assassinator was staying, and the room, and I just want to tell you that that hotel, that has been turned also into an adjunct museum. This is about civil rights and Martin Luther King, and this one is about everything leading up to the assassination and all about Ray, was that his name? Yes, Ray. All about him leading up to the assassination. It's got, the rifle, it's got all kinds of things from the FBI and stuff. And then also as he was evading capture and what he did there and then how they caught him. So I just want to say that there is an entire museum dedicated, to that, to the assassination.
Thank you.
All right, so hello everyone. So I just had a question for you.
You have to speak directly, closely into the microphone.
And I'll
Thank
stand
you.
over here so you can get me.
Okay. So as President Trump has come into office, he's made some controversial decisions, as in like the two genders, how there will only be like two genders, like you can not identify, but so how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is certainly ringing true in recent events. And looking at, orders like that, they're clearly not meant to have any real practical impact. What would it even mean to say, oh, we don't recognize, and even in the wording it says that members of the federal agency will only be recognized as they were. And in fact, as many people have pointed out, the way that it's written implies that all men are trans, because as you may be aware, it actually takes several weeks before the zygote develops the Y chromosome, which is what, in their view, makes a man a man. And so even from not even a controversial scientific perspective, it doesn't really make any sense. And the point of it was never to make sense. The point of it was to flood the legislation and the courts with all this nonsense rhetoric that is dubiously legal, to say, you know what, I'm just going to do whatever I want, and you guys can all figure it out. Let the chaos spew, and everyone else has to clean up the mess, and he can just wipe his hands without having to worry about cleaning up any of it.
Cool.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Do you think there's like a direct reason like behind, like not just to make chaos, or even if it's just to make chaos, what do you think is like reasoning for that? Like why he wants to make that chaos? What do you think about that?
Yeah. So power begets power in capitalism, and the fundamental tenet of capitalism is that capital produces capital. In that what justifies you having money and power is the fact that you have money and power. So people that already have that money and power would like to perpetuate it. And unfortunately, the reality is that if you want to have that class of elite people who get to have all the stuff, and if you want your Jeff Bezoses and your Elon Musks, the reality is that you need a bunch of people that you don't pay very much. In the case, historically, you need a bunch of slave labor to build your railroads. And we look at the people who built the railroads and say, wow, what a great innovator those railroad builders were. But they didn't lay a single track of railroad. They didn't swing a single hammer. As one of the people I mentioned discussed, often the specifics of whether it's black people or gay people or Latino people, it often doesn't really matter what the specifics are, because the point is that they need a much larger class of people that all work for basically nothing, that are the so-called oppressed people that have to do that work. And whatever mechanism they have to say, we are the ones at the top and you are the ones at the bottom, and here's our justification, I think they're willing to take it.
One more thing. So I came like halfway through the service, and then I picked up on a lot of like the black oppression. So as Trump has came into office, he also has already made a statement even before in all his rallies, like saying as soon as I come into office, I will start like ICE
which
deportation.
we've already seen, in fact, yeah.
So it's not the same thing with black oppression, but like what do you think about that? Just starting off, or do you think it's fair? Do you think it's fair justification for Trump to be doing this?
Yeah, I think it's just the next stage of the people saying who are the real Americans, who are the people who are deserving of being American, of being a part of our society, and whether it's saying, oh, black Americans are only worth 3/5 of a real American, or whether it's saying, oh, certain Latinos they don't deserve to be Americans. I don't think that's true, and in fact, like was pointed out, we all have worth. We are all worthy. We're all children of God, if you will. And so I think it's and to say, oh, you're not allowed because you're not American. Well, who's to say what is American? I think what it means to be American. It should be a big open family.
Yeah. So I do agree with that. But the only thing I think is like your question, like what it means to be an American. I think Trump, like, it's like he does say very controversial stuff, but I think to have like a running country, something like America is one of the like greatest military, it's up there,
in military power, yeah.
Military power. It's safe. A lot of different countries can't have that. So I think I definitely understand what you're saying about like that. In there, it's not, you do not like 3/5 of the person. You're a person. You all have worth. You're all the same. But if I think that it's a good thing that we have the system of you have to get into the country legally, because if you don't. It just turns into like how controversial like things happen, like with people losing jobs because of like illegal people coming into the country. It just turns into a ton of chaos. But if you do apply and you do get it and you're an American, but if you don't, you're still all your works are the same, but you're just like you did it illegally. And it's really not, it's not fair that you weren't born in America. It's not fair like that you do get declined or tons of people are wanting, but at the same time,
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, a job is a job, Someone has to do it. Usually people don't want to do it.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we have those jobs at all, given the state of automation and all that. And so to say, oh, the wrong person got that job, well, if someone has a job, that's probably pretty good for them. So I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
And and at the end of the day, I'm not so concerned with figuring out which group is the right group to point at and say you're the cause of all of our problems. Yeah.
So I just want to maybe like an example.
Maybe one last question.
Yeah, or like just like an example. Sure. So just an example. Say one of your family members, right, is homeless. Like they're not like
pretty common situation around here. Yeah.
They're not on
not altogether
drugs. Yeah,
mentally.
But one like they're not like a drug addict or anything. They're just homeless because the economy's tough. Like it's just stuff has happened.
Yeah.
So and then under the ruling of Biden, he lets in a lot of Latinas, or not just Mexican people, and your family member, right, wants to get a job at, say, Ace Hardware or McDonald's or something like that. But all those jobs are taken now because of illegal Mexicans.
Well, but my family member got a job or didn't?
They didn't get the job because
somebody else got a job.
Yeah. So what do you think about that now?
I think about, my family, as I mentioned, my mother was raised Jewish. And we talk thank you for your questions.
Yeah.
We talk at Passover about, which is about the plight of the Jews and their slavery in Egypt.
Yeah.
We say that when we reflect on our time in slavery and our time being at the lowest rung of the social hierarchy, we see these oppressions still today. And when we see the suffering of another person, we have to think of it just as we see the suffering of our own family. That true love and true beloved community is about that all people are, even though we feel this deep, loving connection to our family, the truth is that all people have these vibrant and beautiful inner universes, and that all people need to be respected. And so it might be really hard for me to say, even if I don't get that job, and I've not gotten jobs, trust me, and I know that somebody else did, and I can be bitter about that. In fact, I was, for a long time about not getting the jobs I wanted or not getting into the schools I wanted, and thinking about all the people who maybe got those positions. And the fact that they got in means that I didn't. But they worked hard too, and they've got their friends and their families. And who am I to say, to go up to any one of those people and say, you're the one who wasn't worthy. You're the one who wasn't supposed to get in, because I was the one who was supposed to get that job. And it's a tough world, man, and it's hard to point blame. We can chat more afterwards if you like. Yeah, we got to wrap up. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you both.
One more.
Yes.
One last question before we end.
Well, this isn't exactly consistent, but I just wanted to mention, I think about this, I heard on Amy Goodman's Democracy Now!, which does excellent coverage on the internet, democracynow.org. At a demo for last week, she said one sign said, MAGA stands for morons are governing America. I just love that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
anyone who thinks that the immigrants are taking good jobs, I can take you to my neighbor next door who was mowing his lawn until he found a Hispanic to mow his lawn, whereby he promptly gave up mowing and gave up his dream to go to South Carolina because at Del Taco, one place they went to, they only spoke Spanish, and he was outraged. I could also take you to the Central Valley where they have irrigation jobs that I know of because I worked in something that dealt directly with the irrigation. There are a plenitude of jobs where you show up at midnight, or rather you're hired, but at midnight you siphon the water onto the crop, and at 6 a.m., you terminate that siphon. Low-wage jobs, and the person I remember talking to about this, he was white, he worked with me, he was a PhD, and when I told him that I would willingly do any job, including that one, he said, "Oh, Walt, don't tell me that. I'll lose all respect for you. You wouldn't do something like that, would you?" I said, "I thought it was called an irrigator position." He said, "Regardless of what it's called, the Hispanics do that. You wouldn't do a job like that, would you? Tell me you wouldn't." But anybody here who wants to do all those many jobs, including plucking chicken feathers all day and so that people can have cheap chicken, I'll personally find you one of those jobs. I guarantee it, especially that person who is next door and has somebody mowing his lawn. Hopefully you'll be willing to work for not very much and show up Monday morning before 8 a.m. to mow, because the person who comes does a very good job there. Thank you.
Thank you, Walt. Is there anyone online, Adam? My final comment.
I want to point out that everyone that receives $1 for working consumes something and creates another job to replace the one that they took. And so we don't need to look at it as a negative sum to have immigrants here, because the jobs they take are the jobs they make.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts. Now please join us in the parish hall for further fellowship.